here sooner rather than later. Thank you for those that are able to come in person here. Welcome. And thank you again to Chris for presenting, and those that are able to join us virtually here for our first kind of hybrid one of these. And we're back to our regular nonprofit every 2 months schedule now. Some of the presentations that we've had in the past required us to kind of do those in funky months, but we're back to what was our every 2 month plan with this. So I'm very happy to have Chris Baker here, President and CEO of the Delaware County Foundation. Dean was also going to be here as well to prevent that together, but he, I believe, is coming off vacation and not able to be part of this one, but he said Chris totally got it and will do a fantastic job. I'm very happy to have him here. The topic is from the greatest generation to the latest generation, the generational differences confronting nonprofits. And I guess for the first time, nonprofits have 5 generations represented in the workplace and as donors and volunteers. And that means 5 approaches to work in philanthropy. And we're going to learn how to adjust our organization to a multi-generational reality. And I guess Chris, you can provide a little bit more background on himself. And then after his presentation, there'll be another shorter presentation by Elizabeth Moore with Marion County Children's Services, but also who went through our Leadership Marion program. And she is going to talk about one of the 3 projects that was selected and put together by this year's leadership class, a really awesome project that I believe absolutely would impact all of our nonprofits in the community. So we're very happy to have her go into more detail on that after Chris's presentation. So with that, I'm going to spin this camera around, and we're going to make sure that everyone on the Zoom can hear him present before we get going. So let's give it a shot. I'm also going to do that screen share here as well. Okay.
Good to go.
Oh. And everyone see the screen on Zoom? Can everyone hear us?
Yes. Yes, I hear you and see that.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, excellent. Well, it's a pleasure to be able to join you today. And thanks for that great introduction. Part of what we're going to be talking about today are generational aspects that play out within both the workplace, but also within, nonprofits. And this is something I became interested in, several years ago. And I'll dig into a little bit, more about that as to why. But for those of you that are in the room, and maybe even for those joining us online, you can just hit the thumbs up button if you've ever been accused of being a young whippersnapper before. Has that ever happened to anybody? Okay, what about if you ever thought to yourself, man, kids these days, they just don't get it. What's up with those headphones, the texting, the skinny jeans? What's the world coming to, right? I think we've all probably been guilty of that at some point. Yeah, I think that's probably something that we've all experienced. And frankly, that's probably nothing new to the human experience. In fact, I would imagine that it's probably been a disconnect between generations since the beginning of time. What is different today, as Matt mentioned, is that for the first time in human history, we actually have 5 generations living on Earth and participating actively in the workplace, and then also in your organizations. So that really leads us to some interesting dynamics, that we certainly want to be mindful of and explore. So with that, advance my slide. It's always technology. There we go. So just really quickly on the objectives of what I'm hoping to cover. Today we're going to identify the social demographics of each generation. So we're going to talk a little bit about those generations on the whole. And then we're also going to focus on strategies for overcoming generational differences. So generally, when I start with the group, I'll often ask the question, so what makes one generation different from the other? And I'll ask each group to do a little brainstorming around that. But because we have people joining us virtually, online, I'm just going to cut to the chase here. So for both demographers and social scientists, generations are much more than simply the dates of which people are born and then die. In fact, there's a wide body of work that's done around the social demographics of generations, and that's done so with the theory that our life experiences really have a significant outcome on how we view the world. So the things that happen as we're growing up really influence the way that we work, the way that we communicate, and the way that we respond to change. So that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. So that really represents the lens through which I'll be presenting the bulk of our topic. So as we look at the generations here, I just want to acknowledge that depending upon which demographer or statistician you're using, they each define generations a little bit differently, so that the date ranges may vary a little bit, and the descriptors actually will change a little bit. So for today, I'm really going to focus on those descriptors that were generated by the Pew Research Center, and these are pretty common out there. So the first generation that is still kicking and certainly actively involved in our community are the traditionalists. They're often referred to as the silent generation or even the matures. And there's roughly 21.8 million Americans in this particular category. Their children were the baby boomers, which really describes the huge population increase that occurred after World War II. So they were born roughly between 1946 and 1964. Their kiddos were my generation, the Generation Xers, which were born between 65 and roughly around 1980. And then we come to the millennials, which were between 1981 and 2000. And then their kids, are coming into the workforce now, today, and they're often referred to as Generation Z or the Nexters, or even the anxious generation, which isn't a great moniker, by the way, but we'll actually get into why that is the case. So my presentation isn't really solely to focus on employment today, but I did want to acknowledge three key things that are happening now that have never happened before. The first is we're living longer lives than at any point in human history. And with that, we're also choosing to stay in the workforce much longer. In particular, you've got baby boomers who are the generation that's just absolutely hanging on in the workforce. Here they for many of them displaced their retirements by a significant number of years at this particular point. And then on the flip side, so this is one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, we also have a unique, generational abnormality in that Generation Z, they're entering the workforce much later than we typically did, anyone else. So all of those things combined really create some interesting elements as we look forward to the future workforce that we're going to need within the nonprofit sector, but also within the greater community. So one of the things I do want to do is I want to drill down and talk a little bit about each generation's shared life experiences. But before I do, I want to give two quick disclaimers. The first is that each of us is a unique human being and that we don't fit perfectly into any one mold or category. We may exhibit one characteristic that's commonly associated with one generation or another, in particular, those that may be in like a gap, for instance, maybe those born in 1980, they're going to share a lot in common with both Xers and millennials. So that's the first thing I want to mention, there. This isn't supposed to be a horoscope, so please take that with the grain of salt. There actually has been a lot of scientific work that's been done in this space around social demographics. The second is, usually when I present this, we're doing so in a day-long format. So we're going to try to cram everything into, I think, about 40 minutes, and I've already gone through 7. So we're going to keep pounding away, here, but certainly acknowledge that we're just going to be glancing a little bit on the topic that we have available to us. So let's take a look at our oldest generation, the traditionalists. So one of the things that social demographers will look at is what are the prevailing child rearing methodologies of the day. So they grew up with many rules and pressure to conform. And in fact, their generation could probably be defined as the spare the rod, spoil the child, right? They were heavily rule based, and that had a lot to do with the outcomes that they've experienced within their lives. In fact, one of the things that really shapes this generation is very different from others that came later, and that was the notion of going along to get along, right? In fact, there was a concept called the average Joe, where it was actually very desirable to be somebody that was average and didn't stand out. It was kind of a generational moniker. So they were greatly shaped by the Great Depression and World War II and the technologies of the day, which were radio and television. I had a chance to experience this in my own life through my grandfather. So he was the person that the Great Depression influenced greatly. I mean, every single shed spread crock tub that came into the house was saved. There was never one thrown away, and every single bolt and the like. So in terms of things that shaped them, really the Great Depression and the various World War II, Korea, many of those things were pretty instrumental there. They tend to be very patriotic and loyal. Again, we mentioned the waste not, want not, criteria. And this was really the last generation that placed faith in institutions. If you're ever in the nonprofit fundraising world, these are probably the last people that will ever give to general support. Everyone else has kind of moved away, from that. They're motivated by respect, recognition, and the notion that they're really trying to build, a legacy. So in terms of how we would communicate with somebody from this generation, really it's all about personal touches and face-to-face interactions. That's how they want, to engage. So their kids, very different. They grew up and have a tendency the world in black and white. When talking about diversity, I mean, they were the children of the civil rights movement. They were also shaped by, the feminist movement, and they were the first generation, that really had women entering into the workforce and staying in a large, number. So you see that reflected in the childhood, rearing of the day. They grew up with fewer rules in a more nurturing environment. I think comparatively to today, it would probably be far less nurturing than what we're accustomed to, but certainly more than their parents' experience. They were largely shaped by the Vietnam War, civil rights, Watergate, rock and roll. Those were big things that happened during that particular time. So they tend to be very loyal to the company and focused on teamwork and duty. Those are going to be elements that are heavily displayed in individuals from the baby boomer generation. Their communication style, it's going to be whatever's most efficient, and that would include things that they're most comfortable with, which would be phone calls and face-to-face interactions, and now even some texting and the like, but it's probably going to be more focused on those. Okay. Moving on to Generation X, here many of the children of this generation really grew up in latchkey or daycare, and frankly that really shaped this generation. There's been a lot of work that's been done around that. They grew up in turbulent economic times. They witnessed the fall of the Berlin Wall, the AIDS epidemic, and working mothers were certainly big within there. We're the generation of the work to live, which is a pretty big difference between the previous generations, where it was really one company as a career. That was a high focus of that. And unfortunately, the thing that came along around this time is you start seeing some breakups in large corporations, and there's less security around career. So that's certainly something that begins to impact this generation. So we're looking at a change from job security to career security. So they're focusing on transferable skills that will be able to move from one, corporation or one organization to the other. Really big into diversity, work-life balance, and those interests are really reflected in their career and philanthropic goals. Their communication style is really going to be whatever is going to be most efficient, including phone calls and face-to-face meetings. Again, that's the comfort zone for them as well. Millennials, which actually became the largest group represented in the workforce, and also starting in 2016, we became the largest group represented in the workforce and the largest population with around 72.2 million of them. Here we see the helicopter parent, movement. So this was really a big defining generational characteristic of that. Everyone was told that you are not the average Joe. We don't want you to fit in. You're in fact a snowflake, and you can do anything. And that's often reflected as a value in terms of so many things that they pursue. So from the standpoint of other characteristics, they're really the live then work generation. So we're more interested in quality of life than maybe other generations were, but very uninterested in hierarchy or structures, very achievement oriented, and focused on social change. Those are some of the defining characteristics there. In terms of technology, they grew up with technology at their fingertips. For most of this generation's lifestyle, and that really is reflected in the way that they like to engage from a communication standpoint. So social media, text, and email all are probably going to be the preferred method there. In fact, I have a lot of millennial friends that will never even pick up the phone. If I call, they're going to not answer. If I shoot a text, they'll respond in 2 seconds. Okay, our last generation, I think Bear is taking a little bit of a deeper dive. So their childhood was even more hyper focused, with parents. So we went from the helicopter parent to an even more in-depth, parenting strategy there. They're often defined, unfortunately, as the anxious generation. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And some of that is largely believed because of the influences around global terrorism, school shootings, and social media. Those were some really big things that happened to this particular generation. They tend to also be one of the most diverse generations and progressive in terms of their work viewpoints as well too. So here they're really not interested in the live then work. It's more, how can I make one of my hobbies pay? So that tends to be one of the key strategies that we see emerging in this particular generation. So I want to highlight a few things here. Again, digital natives. They're incredibly tech savvy. In fact, they can't remember a world without the internet. They grew up swiping an iPad before they even knew how to talk. So that's heavily reflected in there. And teenage members of Gen Z are connected nearly every waking hour of the day to some type of device. In terms of other values, Gen Zers are incredibly entrepreneurial. They've been raised with businesses like Uber and Airbnb, and they've seen how influencers can build something from the ground up. In fact, the older group within Generation Z, their entrepreneurial spirit is off the chart. 72% of them, say that they want to start their own business at some point in time. In fact, part of their strategy around work is either we're going to make the hobby pay, or I'm going to use this as an opportunity to develop some skills so I can launch my own brand. They are the last generation that will see a white majority in the United States. In fact, between 2000 and 2010, the country's Hispanic population grew at 4 times the rate of the total population. So they're very comfortable with diversity they've grown up and experienced that. In fact, they feel overwhelmingly positive around that particular change that's happened, whereas many other generations maybe are a little bit more skeptical. Interestingly enough, they've experienced an interesting change in family dynamics. Gen Z have the lowest participation of two-parent families of any generation that's come before. In fact, blended households and single-parent households are actually the norm within this particular age group. So you see a lot of same-sex households, working moms, stay-at-home dads, three-parent families, and couples even choosing not to have kids have all increased within this generation cohort. So some of the things that are maybe a little less positive that are areas for concern is Generation Z is the most depressed generation on record. Only 45% of Generation Z individuals say that their mental health is good or very good. Compared with even the millennials, that's a pretty large swing, almost 11% difference. A whopping 91% of Gen Z said they experienced a physical or emotional symptom due to stress or mental illness within the past year, right? So that's actually one of I mentioned before, they're often characterized as the anxious generation. That is an unfortunate thing that's being documented, right now. And that does have ramifications for, the workforce and within our own, organizations. The good thing, is they're also the generation that's most likely to seek, help, with that, which is good. Tying into the, anxiousness and the, depression, Gen Z might also be the most digitally connected generation, but they also have less experience socializing face-to-face. And as a result, they're the most isolated generation, according to the US Loneliness Index. So in case you were ever worried about things like that, they, like I mentioned before, when it comes to generations, we seem to track everything from, how they interact around, their peers and loneliness to generational conflict and the like. So what I shared with you really quickly does read like a horoscope. And what I'm trying to highlight are that each of these generations does have different attitudes. And while I've summarized them, here, there's actually been a large body of work in terms of the social demographics of each generation as it relates to perspective on work, communication styles, their view on authority, our need for approval, all the way down to work ethic and willingness to embrace technology. So again, that's probably my fourth disclaimer for this. Moving really quickly, glossed over a lot of the the numbers behind it to hit kind of the general trends. But this is an area where there actually is a robust amount of work that's being done to kind of highlight those facts. So let's take what we've learned so far and put it to work. So I'm going to share a scenario and ask that you put your knowledge of what I've described using these generational characteristics to see how they're going to play out. So for those of you that are joining me, digitally, I want you to also follow along and answer one of these questions as well. So I'll have you two on this side of the room, you can answer the first question, and on this side of the room, you can answer the second. But to set this up, we have two people within the workplace. So Ryan is a 27-year-old program officer. He hopes to move his way up into a management role in XYZ organization that he's been in for the past 2 years. He'd like to learn everything he can and also has some ideas of his own regarding community outreach that he'd like to see implemented. He has met with some resistance from Doris, who's another program officer. So let's look at Doris here for a second. Doris is a 62-year-old woman who is the go-to person at the XYZ organization, having spent the last 20 years filling every role that has existed there. During staff meetings, Doris takes an active role in shooting down Ryan's ideas, and recently he overheard her telling another coworker that he's all about promoting himself, but lacks the substance to be taken seriously, especially since he's only been in the organization for 2 years. So for my question number one, folks, you're going to focus on what generational characteristics are contributing to Doris's opinions of Ryan. I want you to give some thought to that. And for question number 2, what advice can you offer Ryan to win over Doris? So for you that are following along at home or your office virtually, if you would just type things in the the chat if you have an answer to your question. So let's take about 2 or 3 minutes and see what you come up with. See that?
Yeah. With the 2 of them? Yeah, well, no, not what the characteristics.
Oh, yeah. Actually have a matrix of the, so these are the date ranges. You might glance at that real quick. So you have somebody who's 26 and somebody that's 62. Okay. And then, oops, here, those are the characteristics.
Yeah.
No, she's 62, she'd be a traditionalist. Yep, just breaks over. So that's my one hint. Doris is a traditionalist, Ryan is a millennial. Right, so how are you gonna have Ryan win out?
Is that what it says after or just advice for him?
So you're gonna give him advice on how to win it out.
I would say possibly more life and work focus.
Guess you see the show or like he's a hard worker. That's his problem.
What's the scenario again that they're working through together?
So it's just generally, kind of thinks he's too young, doesn't have enough of the time under his belt.
Okay.
So he's very space there.
I think if he tries to understand Doris and where she's coming from, then he'll.
All right, one more minute and let's report back to the group. What do you think?
Oh, so Teresa, did we go back? You said can you show the prior slide?
Which part?
I think that it was the 2 of them, the 2 profiles.
Okay, we can go back. Maybe. I'll have to click back.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Try again.
There we go. Yep. You want the question or the question? The scenario or the profile? The question.
Teresa, if you can unmute her. Did we get what you needed? Yes.
All right.
I'm sure their responses are up there as well. Actually, I could read them for the recording too.
Right, let's do that. So, well, maybe we start here and then if you share your thoughts, from everyone online. So our question number 1, what generational characteristics are contributing to Doris's opinion of Ryan?
It's the higher. She views it as a chain community, follow what those comments and stuff up the chain, not just flat across.
Right, pay your dues.
Yeah.
Pay your dues is big, there.
And she'd be big on not a lot of change, doing things the way that they haven't done, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the 2 characters, what do we have from online before I share my own thoughts here?
We have Doris's one for.
So she may believe that change is not necessary. Those are all great comments, there. So I would regard the disconnect as absolutely dealing with the fact that she's a traditionalist, so for her, it's company loyalty, right? And she spent 20 years in every position. So regardless of whether there actually needs to be change or not, Ryan hasn't paid his dues. Right? That's going to be a big, part of it. And the fact that, change for traditionalists often come from the top down. If he's trying to, spend something from the bottom up, that's going to be a pretty big, disconnect for the two. All right, so building on that, question number 2, what advice can you offer for Ryan to win over Doris? What do you think? For the two of you here, what are your thoughts? What suggestions could you give?
I think if Ryan shows like intention with just trying to understand where Doris is coming from and valuing her perspective and stuff, that may help him.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts?
I feel like everything has kind of already been said. Like I think that there is a value in letting her know that you respect her and that she has a great place here and she's done her work, and then to also show that you've earned your place here. That's the thing too. Like they are the same position, and so they're supposed to be coworkers, not supervisor. And so I feel like to show that he has already earned his position and he has great ideas to move things forward and things that will benefit the company. Even it said in the thing, like it's not, he's trying to move the company forward. So I think like some of it's already said, like to go ahead and just do some of it and show that this is something that can be done, it's beneficial and it's not to self-promote.
Right.
It's gonna go over well with Doris, if he just goes ahead and does some of the stuff on his own.
No.
Probably not. I think you're going
I
to be
think
throwing
it
gas on the
depends.
fire.
I think it depends. I mean, he's not the supervisor, but she's also not the supervisor. So I wouldn't say like go behind the company's back and just do it anyway, but working with the supervisor, letting her, whoever that is, know like this is why, this is how, and obviously I'm not saying to like go ahead and just do it without having someone's approval, but I think that is a great way to show that this is something that can happen. It's good.
So I think the thing I was shooting for from putting together this scenario really is that we already know that Doris is a traditionalist. It's going to be highly focused on both chain of command and then that company loyalty and paying their dues. So in my opinion, Ryan, the way to build rapport with Doris is to acknowledge that and to really speak to that legacy of involvement with the organization and ask her opinion for how they can improve things together. So I've got some thoughts. In your experience, tell me how this might flesh out. Really, so she has a chance to be able to be an expert. You're really highlighting the fact that she does have a long legacy here. I think that would probably be by the book way of rather than potentially throwing gasoline on there, helping to mitigate that. Okay, so thanks for that. Yeah, you can close out the comments. All right, so we had a chance to collaborate on an example here. So let me explain a little bit about why I feel this is such an important piece of work. So let me begin by sharing that I started in fundraising when I was 24 years old. And just from what I've shared so far, that should probably tell you a little bit about how successful I was. Right? So I was calling on people who were much older than myself, and their backgrounds and life experiences were entirely dissimilar. In fact, it wasn't very uncommon for somebody to say, "Oh, you're just like my grandson," or give me a pinch on the cheek and say, "Well, you're so cute," right? So frankly, I have to say that I was doing pretty poorly. I wasn't equipped to be able to deal with that. In fact, it wasn't until I attended a week-long training experience that included, this is one of the topics that frankly the lights turned on, for me, and I was able to, make some changes, around that. So for me, it's the recognition that what I say is far less important than how I make other people feel, right? So I've made a habit over the last 20 years or so, to really focus on the characteristics of that other person and how they're going to receive what it is that I'm sharing with them. So I've just got a few examples, here on the screen. I mean, I spend a lot of time talking with people who are traditionalists, somebody that is much older than, than myself, at this point. So I'm constantly asking, questions of, as I'm building a rapport, am I also going to be alienating, somebody from something I would say? So for instance, in my career, I've moved around quite a bit. And I did so feeling that as I moved around, I was gaining experiences that were going to better, help the organizations that I came to work for. Now, somebody who has that framework of being a traditionalist who it was one company, one career, they may look at that and see somebody who's already off the bat being fairly disloyal. So when I meet somebody for the first time that's in this age category and they ask a little bit about me and my career, I don't start off by saying, I moved here, I moved here, I moved here. I actually highlight the fact that I spent the first 10 years of my career with the Boy Scouts. Now, I did work for them in 3 different states in multiple positions, but right off the bat, I'm trying to downplay things that are going to potentially be hot button topics for them. So right off the bat, is my communication mannerisms too casual? That's going to be a hot button subject here. And if you slip in a bit of profanity, you probably are going to wreck that relationship and first impression right off the bat with somebody from this particular category. Now, that's the one end of the spectrum on an older generation, but I'm also thinking a lot about younger generations as well and how they're perceiving what I'm saying there as well. So I don't want to be seen as being overly cynical, right? I don't want to be that that Doris who doesn't think change can happen because I've already done a lot in my my career and experienced things. I certainly also don't want people to feel that I'm not inclusive, so that's something I think of a lot about when communicating with somebody who's younger or someone whose standards are unrealistic and unrealistically high. Now, I will say that I have a person that works for me now in this particular age category, and she's an absolute delight, wonderful. But I think sometimes, and I don't say it to myself, man, when I was your age, I was doing this, right? Because that would just upset her. And those circumstances, were different. I put up with a whole bunch of stuff that I don't think people today, would. And I'm not saying that that was a good thing, because it wasn't. It was just the reality that presented us. So this is why I've become a firm believer in this notion that we, as nonprofits, need to be mindful of both when communicating one-on-one, but also when communicating with broad audiences. We need to be thoughtful about what our strategy is to engage each of these 5 different generations that exist in the workplace now. So with that, got a little bit of time left. I want to quickly just shift to the here are some thoughts around best practices for how you can communicate better with each generation. So for bridging the gap with traditionalists, it's going to come down to honoring the chain of command. You want to value the legacy that they've built, value their experience. And again, if you're somebody that has a great personal preference towards sending an email out or a text, and you want to communicate with them around something that's important, that's not the way to do it. They're absolutely not going to respond well to that. And context is the key. For them, it's going to be about organizational history and all the steps that happened along the way. So when we look at somebody from the boomer generation, again, it comes down to respect. If you're younger, acknowledge that you have less expertise and experience, and that's going to go a long way with somebody from this particular generation. In fact, they're highly motivated by merit, and are workaholics. So if you play into that, that's going to be something that plays really well with them. You're also going to want to choose face-to-face conversations whenever you can. Certainly anything that's important, and make sure with this group that you give people your full attention. I have folks come into my office all the time and I'm working on an email and I'm trying to talk with them. If I do that with somebody, in this generation, that's really going to, set them off. They're going to feel that I'm really not giving them my full attention because I'm not, and I'm devaluing that. And again, some elements of context and corporate history are also important with this generation as well. Bridging the gap with Xers. Here, we put a high value on efficiency. You better get to the point. It's bottom line up front, right? That's what you want to be focused on, avoiding jargon and buzzwords. They still do have a preference towards, email and technology, and they only want to meet face-to-face when it's required, right? So now we're seeing a pretty significant shift from the two previous generations. They want to be given space and autonomy to actually go out and do things and execute in the way that they see, it's going to be the best for the situation. So micromanagement is not going to work well with this particular, group. That's going to shift with the next two categories that we're going to talk about. And for them, you better get over the notion of can-dos real quick because it's not going to work well with them either. Millennials really are looking for, a challenge and constant feedback. In fact, we've grown up with the dashboard effect in this generation, where they had always ready access to their, their grades. They knew where they were. They're getting feedback through so many sources. So it's really going to be important to be able to, engage them, provide that, that feedback, and do so in a pretty regular basis. They're also going to need to lighten up and acknowledge that it's okay that that work is fun. This again is where you start to see a generation that's highly focused on that work-life balance shifting more in their favor. And then finally, in connecting with Gen Z, it's offering autonomy and freedom, but a lot of check-in. In fact, some of the studies I read in preparation for this were really interesting when they looked at leadership of their manager and what they wanted out of them. So in the past generation, your millennials, they want to have access to the dashboard, and I'm going to get some feedback, but it's not going to come at me personally. It's going to just be delivered in, through some other, method. Here, they want to have engagement with their manager on a regular basis. In fact, multiple times a day. That's the expectation. That's probably actually where I was, before reading that, maybe even failing a little bit with my youngest employee and not meeting that need. So again, you want to engage their interests, and they're going to be all about rewards, right? So everything is gamified in their world, and it needs to shift pretty frequently. And that doesn't mean simply offering, financial compensation. These small things, but having small goals to work towards and being recognized for that, that's an absolute key when engaging this particular generation. And then the last thing I would mention is before, pretty different from millennials where, I want feedback, but I don't want it to come from a person. Here, they want more of the mentorship experience. They very much want to have a pretty intense relationship, with, those that are mentors to them or supervisors. So that's a little bit about how each of us can bridge generational, gaps through communication and concentrating on some of the values that each of us have. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Chris. I guess I just had just one in terms of if you have a workforce that is multiple different types of generations. How do you make sure you're not sounding disingenuous when you're changing the way you're talking to one and in earshot of the other generation? Like, how do you flip that switch on a regular basis?
Honestly, I don't know, other than I don't know that there is a perfect solution towards that. The Gallup organization has done a lot of work in this space around managing multiple generations in the workplace. So they use a SMART goals framework. In my experience, that's probably one of the best ways of managing those expectations, because the process begins with sitting down with the manager and saying, So here are the goals that you have, for the year. Of course, we want to tie them into the strategic goals of the organization and the like, but then the employee has the flexibility to have some creativity and expand there. So with that also comes the management strategy. So if you're dealing with Gen Z and they're looking for that more consistent daily feedback and small rewards, you build to plan around that. So I think that's probably, in my opinion, one of the best ways that I would approach that. But I certainly acknowledge that there is no one cookie cutter, one size fits all strategy.
Any other questions or thoughts from those online?
This is just an observation of like what we have kind of going on in our workplace right now. It's not these characteristics aren't or can't be seen as much by the generation age range, but the people that have worked there, like the period of time that each person has worked there. So like I have like the lowest seniority of the 9 of our, I'm on the lower end of seniority from the 9 staff that work at the shelter right now. The people that have worked there for like over 10 years or whatever, they show a lot of, and they don't fall in this generation traditionalist mindset, and sometimes baby boomer like mindset and everything. So that's just something that I've kind of observed. It's not as much, it doesn't correspond as much to age, at least in my workplace, as it does some of those characteristics corresponding to how long we work there.
Right. So I would be using that as kind of a platinum rule strategy, right? So if we said the golden rule is how, treating others is how you want to be, treated, I'd be looking to, treat and communicate with them, regardless of what their, age is, how they want to be, treated and perceived.
We've got a thank you, great presentation from Jason. Thank you very much, Jason. And thank you to Chris. Again, great breakdown in a very short amount of time for something like that. With the time we have left then, I think I'll stop sharing this screen and hand it over, maybe. Try,
Do you want me to come over?
yeah, see
You
if,
want to trade? You
See if
you
I-
get closer forward.
it's up to you, it's up to you. If you want to
I
do a
don't
trade,
care.
you want to do a trade? Let's do a trade. I'll get the screen share ready. We're going to have Elizabeth Moore finish us off here with a quick presentation on the leadership class project. And let me get that up here. Share. And, I did make a quick note on your logo. I believe you guys are going to update the.
We are. So this logo was really just for our presentation for the actual like leadership graduation. So we do know that the Marion, Ohio is upside down. In fact, yesterday we met with United Way for their marketing team. And they actually are going to help us create a logo that will be with United Way's colors. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about the partnership with United Way. So this is Get Connected Marion, Ohio. It was founded by the 2021 Leadership Marion class, which is obviously hosted by the Marion Area Chamber of Commerce. It is in partnership with United Way of North Central Ohio. They have fully funded our project. So that is where that partnership came into play. So as we all know from nonprofits, Marion is a very resource-rich community. However, one of the things that I hear a lot when I'm working with some of the different nonprofits and organizations that I work with is that we have funding, but we need volunteers. Now, obviously, we don't always have all the funding that we need, but for the most part, what we need are the people who can help meet those opportunities. So Get Connected is going to help streamline those opportunities available in Marion while connecting those who want to serve. So this is just some general information about Get Connected. It is by Galaxy Digital. The platform itself is a volunteer management software. So it's a very powerful web-based tool. I actually have a thing that you'll be able to see what it kind of looks like. But the gist of it is it connects people to opportunities. So this is, if you are looking at Get Connected, if you're on the website, and for some reason my video is not playing.
I like that, it's really cool. Oh, if I can do
There we go,
that.
all right, that's good, maybe.
Oh, that's good. That says media unavailable.
Oh, no, that stinks. So basically what this was showing you is that this is another Get Connected website from Bayside. It's in California, in the California area. It uses a lot of Google Analytics, so it will help kind of match you in your area. But what this was showing you is that you can scroll through on the website, you can see the different organizations, and we don't have any stipulations. Like, you don't have to be a United Way partner or anything like that to be registered on Get Connected. I believe you don't even necessarily have to be a nonprofit. Now, it is specific to looking for volunteers, so obviously you have to have volunteer opportunities available for people. But on this website, what you would be able to see if the video worked is that you can scroll through and you can see some of the different opportunities that are available. I think one of them that was showing on here was a backpack giveaway, obviously food drives, things like that. Anything you can think of where you would need volunteers, you can put those opportunities on the website. Then as a registered volunteer, I would go on, I could see those opportunities. I can see what you need. Do you need me for one time, for a couple hours? Is this an ongoing need? So for example, I'm thinking of one of my friends that I'm gonna have be one of the leaders is Erin Slater. She's the director of Marion Mentor. So obviously when she has her needs on there, she's gonna have ongoing needs. These are things she needs throughout the entire year. But she maybe has like a one-time drive that she's gonna do and can use a bunch of volunteers on one day. And so you can put all of those things, you can volunteer as a group. Yes, Delaware did just begin using the software, which was funny because we were looking at different platforms and this is the one that we had kind of decided on. And then Doris sent me an article, I think it was, that there was a place in Delaware that just started using the same exact platform. So that was super cool. But you can register as a group. So if you have like a business that reaches out to you and they say, hey, we want to have our volunteers, we want to have our organization come and volunteer 5 hours or something like that. We're going to have a whole group of people. They can register everything on here. The other thing it can do is it can give you like time-stamped check-in. So there is an app feature. The app does not have all of the full, yes, you have to, no, you do have to keep up, updating everything. And so that's one of the things like that our leadership from Leadership Marion Group, we are going to keep reaching out to some of those organizations so that you can refresh your needs. And so it will keep, every time someone refreshes an opportunity, it gets moved to the top. So obviously you want to refresh your needs so that it keeps getting moved to the top, but then it also keeps everything updated. So that is the thing. Galaxy Digital, so it was used in the past here, Get Connected with United Way of North Central Ohio. They did use this platform, but they had one person owning it. So one of the things that we did this time to make it different is we have a team of people who will own it and we'll go in. We've already been going through this training on how we can best keep it updated, how we can best help you keep your opportunities updated. So you can put on like, here are the different causes, or here's the needs that we have. And then I, as a volunteer, can go in and say, here are my interests, and then it will help match those too. So one of the things they told us in training is obviously if you're putting in a volunteer opportunity, you want to put everything that it could be, every single thing that it could be, because then it will more likely start matching people to your needs. So basically what we could use from you, as well as what you can use to benefit from this, is we do have a Facebook page. It just was created yesterday. It's serving right now more as a placeholder. It is Get Connected Marion, Ohio. But that's where we'll keep everything, all of our information after our big launch, which will be at right here for the United Way Business After Hours. We're going to have several opportunities on there. So if you are one who wants to have opportunities that will be on there for that big launch. So our goal is that we will have those options. So I, as a person who comes to Business After Hours, I'm just learning about this awesome app and this awesome opportunity. I can go in and register, create my profile, and then I can go right now and start picking some opportunities that I can volunteer for. So what we'll do is get your opportunities on there so they will be ready for that launch. But the best way to probably stay informed is going to be through that Facebook page for now. And then obviously, if you want to reach out to myself I didn't put my contact information on there since I'm in the midst of that transition to a new position.
We'll include it afterwards.
Yes, and I do have my tentative email address. They're working on setting it up so that I could have it for people. And then obviously encourage people to register to use Get Connected. This was fully funded for the first year by United Way. And they're willing to continue that partnership as long as it's being used. If it's not being used, there's no point in having it. So we would love to see people who are on there using it. One of the other things, so the co-leader of this initiative with myself is Tim Thacker, who's from Adult Probation, Municipal Probation, sorry. And one of the things he wanted was to get people connected to resources. So we have finagled, I found a little way we can finagle where if I'm a person who has a need, say I have a need for food or I have a need for those backpacks or something like that, I can go in and I can find that also through Get Connected. So that one we're not as solid on just because we have to make some changes for it to work in that way. But we do know and we have seen, which you could have seen in this video if it would have worked right, how it can work to connect people to the opportunities. So does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Okay.
In terms of the volunteers, let's say you have already a database of volunteers that you decide, maybe it's in Excel, maybe it's some way of, you have their volunteer and their communication information. Is there a way to upload that information to the database, or do you need all of those volunteers to then get the app and then enter themselves into that in order to start receiving communication? And then for the individual volunteer opportunities, let's say someone, we're talking about generational. So if you have someone who's going to be helping you at a certain event, that takes away one of the volunteers that you need. Are you able to manually remove them? Say like, okay, we've got one of these locked in for this. They just didn't use the app to register themselves for it, but you at least can track that as a nonprofit.
Those are really good questions that I don't know the answer to. As far as the emails, I believe, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe you can go in and upload that information. And it would probably just send them an email to register for the site. And the thing, so one of the things that I really like because for those of you who don't know, I'm also the co-director of a nonprofit in town, Rural Family Kids. And so one of the things I liked, and I had to manually do myself because I have to do a report every year. I mean, I just did my report for this summer, is going in and tracking volunteer hours, like total volunteer hours that also then translate to funds, right? So that was something that we had to go in and do. And we have, our set group of here are the people who volunteer the whole week, but then we also have this committee and this committee and this committee, and we have these volunteers. And so we have to track all that. So that is something that will be helpful. I know it doesn't answer your question, I'm sorry. But I do believe as far as the email goes, yes. As far as the other one goes, I'm not sure. I want to say that is a possibility, but I just don't know concretely.
As the event is happening or about to happen, does it send automatic, will it send push notifications about the event, have to remind the volunteers to sign up for it, so deal?
I'm not entirely sure if they're on, I think there is an automatic, like it will remind, but we have the option to do push notifications, to do emails, to do text reminders as administrators.
That's cool.
Yes, so it does reach, all those different generations. Some of us don't ever check email and will just send me a text, and that's way better.
SMS texting from the app is free for the nonprofits.
It's free for you guys. We paid, it was part of the funding.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, everything as far as this goes is free for the organizations other than United Way.
That's excellent. Yeah.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to seeing it get used, because I think it'll be an easy way to help connect people. Because one of the things I hear the most from other people, and I think I heard the most when I was sitting in the first leadership class, is all of these people are like, well, I want to volunteer, I want to be involved in the community, I just don't know how. And so obviously all of us are like, we have 100 ways for you to get involved in the community. So this will be really easy to this will help you get connected to something that you are interested in too. So I think that's awesome.
Awesome. Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm not seeing anything more in the chat. So with that, I want to say again, thank you very much to Chris for presenting, and Elizabeth for presenting, and for those able to attend or watch the recording afterwards.
Thank you, and we will, I guess, see each other again in 2 months. I've got one comment, great presentation. So thank you again, and everyone have a great weekend. Thank you.